We're talking about the Kerrie-Orozco Act, and this extends the same immigration-related assistance currently provided to families of military personnel to first responders like police and fire. Currently, spouses of military personnel who are killed in the line of duty may be able to apply for expedited citizenship. Kerrie-Orozco gave her life protecting the citizens of Omaha. I'm proud and honored to bring forth this bill, which will provide much-needed stability to the Orozco family and all families who find themselves in a similar tragic situation. Everyone who wears a uniform protecting and securing us at home and abroad deserves our nation's gratitude and compassion. When Kerrie's husband Hector came to me seeking help for their children, it was clear that this is something we could do in Congress, together, Republicans and Democrats working together. And it's something that we must do and should do. With this legislation, Hector, who is in the process of receiving his green card, will be eligible for citizenship immediately upon receiving his green card, as opposed to having to wait at least 5 years, as is now the case. So at this time, to give some background and fill in some of the cracks here in the story, I'd ask Kristen Fear now to come up and give a statement. Kristen, would you mind doing that? Kristen, of course, is Hector's lawyer and the lawyer for the Orozco family.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and I want to especially thank Congressman Ashford for taking up this issue and listening to us when we came to him with this case. This bill is very important, not just for Hector and his family, but for the family of all first responders. These are people who every day put their lives on the line, put themselves at risk to keep us safe, to protect us so that we can live in this great country, in this stable country, and they deserve to have the same protection. And this bill would obviously bring a great amount of stability and comfort to Hector, but to all the spouses and first responders that are putting their lives on the line every day for us. And I would just ask the media at this time to continue to respect Hector's family's privacy and direct any additional inquiries you have to either Congressman Ashford's office or to me. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have at this time.
What would you say to the comments who are not with us?
Do you want to let me respond real quickly to that? This is a central core question, and I appreciate it. I don't know of any opposition. I mean, when we started this process a few weeks ago, I went immediately to Steve King, and Steve is the congressman across the river. He did represent Council Bluffs at one point. His district has changed. And I went to David Young, who does represent Council Bluffs, and obviously the Orozco family lives in Council Bluffs, or near Council Bluffs, and Kerrie's buried in Council Bluffs. There was no opposition. So I have probably spoken to 50 members of Congress, equally Republicans and Democrats, and I literally have had no one say no. So if we're talking about the members of Congress that will have to vote on this bill, I have found no opposition. So it's very encouraging. And why we're moving forward now is because of the lack of opposition. And we're drafting the bill. I'll spend the next few weeks gathering signatures prior to its introduction. So if you have any other.
What is the situation that Hector's family is in right now? Can you explain kind of to the general public what they're going through as far as their status here?
Sure. Well, obviously, Hector's 3 children are all United States citizens. Hector currently has a U visa, and he has submitted his application for lawful permanent residence, and that is pending. Typically, those applications can take up to a year to get a decision on, and then once approved, Hector would have to wait 5 years before he could even apply for citizenship, which then takes at least 4 to 6 months for that process. So we approached Congressman Ashford's office to help us kind of expedite, especially the residency process for Hector. We really wanted to give him that peace of mind and that stability, considering everything that his family is going through. And in light of the protections that already exist for our military members, we really think that this is an excellent opportunity to extend those protections to people who similarly put their lives at risk for us.
What are the potential consequences if this act is approved?
Well, the consequences for Hector would be that it's going to be a much longer path for him. It just will take more time. And obviously that creates more stress and hardship for his family, and they've had enough stress and hardship. So we're really hopeful that people will be supportive of this because it will do a lot of good for Hector and many other families.
Is there a chance that he could be deported?
No.
Had Kerrie lived, the irony of all this is had Kerrie lived, then Hector's application for citizenship would have occurred prior to this 5-year period of time. So the irony of all this is that her death in the line of duty elongates the process for the application. So that in and of itself is an inequity that seems.
Why does somebody have to die for Congress to actually try to make some sort of sensible immigration reform?
It's a great question, and to get to the immigration issue a bit, it seems to me that when these kind of things happen, where you have someone like Hector who is a productive citizen, not citizen, but productive resident of this area, married to a person in law enforcement, it shines a light on something that most people, I would think, would say, well, why doesn't this just get worked out? My hope is that we take this small example of something that does need to get worked out, and it'll continue to keep that discussion going on immigration. But clearly, it seems to me this transcends the immigration debate. This is so compelling. This is all about the babies and the families, and that it transcends immigration. But obviously there is an immigration component to this. Will it make the immigration debate more robust or compelling? Will it move us quicker towards more resolution of immigration issues? I have no idea. But it certainly is an example of what happens when you don't have some of these laws tightened up.
And is it some immigrants will have more rights than others citing for this? Because it's your specifically first responders, military. There are other immigrants that aren't in that position.
Right. I think it's about the families of the deceased member of the armed services, or in this case, the first responders. Because what we're trying to say here is, if you are a first responder, a police officer like Kerrie, you're married to someone who is going through the process of becoming a citizen, you as the first responder, I think, are entitled to have the comfort that if something were to happen to me, if I were a first responder, or to Kerrie, they have that sense that my spouse, my children are going to have citizenship. They're going to have stability that I would have been able to give them had I lived. I think that's the essence of this. And so there are other cases, other instances where a spouse dies and this particular right or this advantage would not apply. But our first responders are out there. They're out there risking their lives, and they need to have that sense that the communities behind them, the nations behind them, if something were to happen to them, that their family would be okay. And certainly obtaining citizenship and a more stable work environment for the 3 children who are U.S. citizens, I think is pretty compelling and important.
What are the specifics that citizenship would offer? We talk about it easier on the family. But what are the specific things that Hector would be entitled to as a citizen versus his current status?
Well, I think obviously one of the most important rights you have as a citizen is that you can vote. I also think that, and I would just echo my comments in the article in the World Herald, that it's about stability. And that brings a lot of comfort to the family. And I think that is something that when you are a citizen, especially if you were born in this country, you can't appreciate the hardship and the stress that it is to go through this immigration process. I've been in this field for almost 10 years. I've guided hundreds of families through this, and it is never easy no matter what the situation is. It creates a great deal of stress for them and hardship for them. So having this benefit in place takes that away from someone. Then they don't have to worry about that. And that, of course, is what we want to do for people whose spouses are going out and risking their lives to protect us. And then a sense of patriotism, of course. This is something that Hector wants. He wants to become a citizen of this country. He loves this country.
You've been dealing with this for 10 years. Emotionally, what is it like? How do people describe not being able to get their citizenship or losing someone and having to go through this thing? What is the emotional process that they go through?
I think it is can only be described as heart-wrenching. What these families go through. I've seen families torn apart, families fall apart because of the hardships that they have to endure, not because they aren't able to go through the process, but because the process is so difficult and so lengthy and so challenging and so complicated. And I think that that's something, referring back to your question, that the world of immigration seems to be very misunderstood. I think people think it is something simple. It is not. It's incredibly complex. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and myths that surround immigration and immigrants. And I think that hopefully this act will allow us to open up that conversation a little bit. And I think Hector's story is a great example of someone who has come here to make a better life for themselves and has contributed to our community and wants to be a part of our community. And this is something we can do to help him.
Congressman, in your bill, is first responders specifically defined? In other words, same case scenario. Illegal immigrant married to an American citizen. American citizen happens to be walking into a convenience store as it's being held up. Gang member kills that person as they're trying to maybe help out in the situation. Would they be considered a first responder as a private citizen, or is this only for police and fire?
There's a federal definition about that defines a first responder under federal law. Essentially, it's police and fire EMS workers who are consistently putting themselves in the line of fire, and it would not go beyond that. But to your very first question, again, I think, and your point is very well taken, this can't help but enlarge the discussion about immigration policy generally, and some of the things that happen to families in this process. So I can't help but think they'll have more discussion. But this bill is very narrow, but I do think it meets the criteria of a very important piece of legislation to move forward with.
Congressman, you mentioned how this is going to impact the Orozco family. Have you spoken with any other families who this might affect?
We don't know. That's a great question. We don't know. We're trying to find out at this point by doing some research as to how many other families are impacted. We don't know the answer to that. I'm sure there are some. I don't think it's a large number. So it's not so much, though, the number of families right now, I think, but it is every first responder, as is the case with the military, who are in the line of duty. They're in the line of fire, and if you have citizenship, if you're Hector Orozco, and he is a very compelling person to talk to, he's a good man, you talk to him, and he talks about the need for stability for his children. If you are a citizen, an employer is going to take a risk on you. You're going to be here. You're a citizen. You're not going to go back, where you're going to stay here with your children, and that allows Hector, I think, to have an advantage for a job. So I don't know how many people this covers, but it covers every first responder and every member of the military, in the sense that they have that sense of stability and feeling that their spouse and their children will be cared for if something happens to them. So that's really the essence of it, I think.
We hear a lot about what Officer Orozco did for our community, but we don't hear a lot about the spouses of those first responders. Either one of you going to be able to talk about why the spouse's role is important. You see the
You know that. You know about that, so you can.
Sure.
What maybe might not be, out there, but might be something that Hector has contributed?
Well, I mean, Hector has been working at the same company for a number of years. He's moved up in that company. He has a supervisor there. So, he's someone who is responsible. He's hardworking. He's obviously been paying taxes. But additionally, when you're a first responder and you have children, Hector talked about Kerrie working nights. And how he would worry about her, and she would always call him if she was going to be later than she anticipated. So of course, if she's working nights, Hector's home with their children. Spouses support our first responders so that they can go out and do their job without having to worry. And so we need to give our first responders the peace of mind that their spouses in turn are going to be protected. I think they deserve at least that much.
And we see that with military families all the time. There are obviously a much greater number of military families in this situation probably than there are first responders. I don't know, but my guess would be that there are. But whether there are or aren't, we see this with military families, and just the fear and the concern about their spouses. So this is. I met with Hector, and he's such an incredible person. And he was so humble about this. And I asked him, do you want this? This is going to put your family more in the spotlight than it already is. I mean, it's going to talk about your background, right? And are you okay with that? And he said, I want to do this for my family and every other family. I mean, he's a very, very compelling person. And he's the kind of person we want to have here. And so I think it's such a great story. His strength to come here, to think about, I want to come talk to Congressman Ashford about helping other families in my situation is pretty amazing. So,
I think Kerrie's not maybe the selflessness that we've seen.
total selflessness.
Yeah. And I think it really is a great way to continue Kerrie's legacy. I mean, we've seen so much come out about Kerrie, how much she helped the community. She loved helping others. And I think that, in talking to Hector, I really learned that Kerrie really had a compassion for and wanted to help people who were on the margins as well. And so I think that this bill is an excellent way to carry forward her legacy of wanting to help the community, wanting to make the community a better place. And, she lived that every day. She died for that value. And this is a great way to honor her.
We got time for maybe one or two more questions.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No, Joe's in charge. I barely am.
Why isn't he here then? You say that he's a very compelling person that wants to get this message out. Yet we're constantly told that, respect his privacy. Is he in fear of any retaliation with gang members? Is there some other issue? Why, Congressman Ashford says he's so adamant about getting this story out here, yet he's not out here telling his story. Why?
Yeah. Honestly, I've worked with Hector for a number of years. He's just I would describe him as very shy, very, very humble, and very much a family man. And I think that he wants to do this and he wants to support it, but he's just not someone who seeks the spotlight. He is not. And I think that considering what his family has been through in the last few months, what his children have been through, what they're still going through, I think he feels right now his job is to protect his family, his children, and that just means letting them grieve in privacy. And that's why he's asking for privacy right now.